Look at a map of global wealth, and you will quickly notice a paradox. Some nations with massive natural reserves struggle with poverty, while others, with almost nothing in the ground, build the most advanced economies on Earth. Take a piece of raw iron ore. Pulled straight from the dirt, it holds very little economic weight. It is just potential. The difference between potential and prosperity comes down to a macroeconomic principle called value addition. Human ingenuity and labor transform basic materials into complex, highly lucrative goods. That iron becomes high-grade steel. The steel becomes an engine block, then assembled into a finished vehicle. At every step, the material becomes exponentially more valuable. True national wealth is actively engineered and manufactured on the assembly line. We can see this blueprint clearly by looking at the mid-20th century. Following massive destruction, several nations faced the daunting task of completely rebuilding their economies, and they all turned to the exact same strategy. Japan focused entirely on integrating a highly disciplined workforce with heavy industrial machinery. They imported raw materials, processed them, and exported finished high-quality products. Germany adopted a similar approach. They engineered precise, mass-manufactured goods, pushing the scale of production to levels that allowed them to dominate global automotive exports. Decades later, South Korea and China utilized the same playbook. They started with labor-intensive assembly lines, piecing together electronics and consumer goods to break into international markets. These distinct economic expansions shared a common architecture. They were driven by deliberate statecraft that forced domestic industries to meet the uncompromising standards of global export markets. This creates a powerful multiplier effect. A single specialized factory job requires a vast support network, spawning local parts suppliers, maintenance crews, and specialized logistics companies just to keep the main assembly line running. As these supply chains cluster together, the intense concentration of workers and capital organically pulls in further services, eventually turning once quiet rural areas into dense, highly productive urban centers. The factory acts as an economic anchor. It sets off a self-sustaining ecosystem that steadily elevates the income and living standards of the surrounding community. But a factory cannot operate in isolation. The continuous demand for raw materials and the distribution of finished components require physical networks that stretch far beyond the facility's gates. Industry imposes strict, unforgiving physical requirements. It relies on uninterrupted power grids, heavy-duty highways that can support constant freight traffic, and expansive railway systems. This scatterplot shows the direct correlation between a region's infrastructure index and its overall industrial value added. The data demonstrates that higher productivity is inextricably linked to the availability of core physical infrastructure. Furthermore, the pressure to move these finished goods out to international buyers forces governments to construct massive maritime hubs and high-capacity aviation centers. The relentless demands of manufacturing compel a nation to modernize its entire physical landscape, creating a logistical foundation that ultimately benefits every citizen and sector of the economy. We are seeing this strategy deployed today in India. The country has laid out an explicit national ambition to scale its manufacturing sector to a $1 trillion economy by fiscal year 2026. To reach that scale, the government introduced the Production-Linked Incentive, or PLI scheme. This operates as a direct financial catalyst, tying economic incentives strictly to incremental increases in domestic production. This chart visualizes the resulting surge in India's electronics sector. Over the past 11 years, domestic production volume has experienced a six-fold increase. This output reflects a sophisticated shift in production. The actual domestic value added within these electronics has more than doubled. India is systematically re-engineering its economy, shifting from its historical role as a massive consumer market into a central, indispensable pillar of global supply chains. Sustaining this kind of industrial resurgence requires constant technological innovation and the continuous upskilling of the workforce to manage increasingly sophisticated systems. Having direct control over the means of physical production provides a critical buffer. It insulates a nation's economy against volatile global supply chain shocks and sudden geopolitical shifts. Securing long-term global leadership requires moving entirely beyond the advantages of cheap labor and mastering highly complex, advanced manufacturing processes. In the current architecture of global economics, geopolitical weight belongs to the countries that possess the physical infrastructure and the rigorous discipline to build these complex systems. Measured observational tone. Mastering the capability to forge the world's most complex products is what ultimately grants a nation lasting wealth and true independence.